If you want to win some money on Monday night, you have to first leave your emotions at the door. And this video will help you do just that. Let me explain. I'll be going off of my projections for this slate and finding the optimal plays, starting with the best play on the slate, $8,000 T. Higgins, because Jamar Chase is out. And Higgins is going to have a matchup versus the Browns defense that ranks 28th overall. And when healthy this year, Higgins, because he's been hurt in 2 games, healthy, averages 8.6 targets per game. And now Jamar Chase, who is second in the NFL in overall targets with 10.6 per game, he's out. So yeah, those are going to get a little bit funneled to Higgins. So you want to have exposure to Higgins, especially in the captain spot, and then this Browns wide receiver. You see, $5,000 flat Donovan Peoples-Jones is a fantastic play, especially on these one-game slates in a GPP. He's going to have a size advantage over all 3 of the starting cornerbacks, and there's some good cornerbacks back there of the Cincinnati Bengals. His best matchup will be versus Eli Apple. And if we look at his targets this year, more so over the last month of the season, he is averaging nearly 7 targets per game, and he's top 70 yards in 3 of his last 4 contests. And the dude basically doesn't leave the field. He's running nearly 30 routes per game and playing 86% of the snaps this year. He's stayed healthy. Plus, very quietly, he's a borderline top 24 wide receiver when it comes to the fantasy cheat codes, and that's your deep targets and your red zone targets. That leads to a lot of upside, especially at this price point on a one-game slate. So you have a somewhat expensive receiver in T. Higgins, and then you get a $5,000 nice value for a one-game slate. But let's talk about another wide receiver. And this guy's basically slap dab right in the middle of both of those pricing. $6,400 Tyler Boyd, very close to being the best play on the slate with his teammate T. Higgins. This man averages 12.8 points per game when Jamar Chase is not on this team. Now that was in 2020 when Joe Burrow was just starting out and there was no Jamar Chase. But when Burrow was actually healthy that season, Boyd was averaging over 14 points per game. And it's not like Tyler Boyd's overall playing time is going to go up. He already leads the NFL in slot snaps and the 5th most routes in the league, but more so he'll move from the slot to the outside, which opens up some big play upside downfield. And with Jamar Chase out, instead of Boyd being targeted on 15% of his routes, this number will creep up to 20+%, and that's where you start to see him average, instead of 5.4 targets per game, 8 targets in this contest, and that's where he is a fantastic value. So expect Tyler Boyd to bring in 5 or 6 receptions in this game, and for this price point, yeah, he's definitely a captain option and one of the most optimal plays on the slate. And quietly, Amari Cooper will likely be under-owned at $7,600 because he's sandwiched in between Boyd and Higgins, who are clearly fantastic plays, and a lot of people will know that. But a little bit under the radar, Amari Cooper in 5 out of his last 6 games has gone over 10 fantasy points, and he's averaging 8.4 targets per game during that time. And he's a top 12 wide receiver in the cheat codes. So for this price tag of $7,600, based on the usage he's actually seeing, he should probably be $9,000 to $9,500. He has 17 20+ yard targets and red zone targets this season. Again, this is borderline top 10 in the NFL, leads to a safe floor and major upside. And Amari Cooper is number 1 in the entire NFL at earning targets versus man coverage, and the Bengals play man coverage at a top 5 rate. So this sets up nicely for Amari, who likely comes in lower owned than he should. Now let's talk about the Browns' new tight end, the 30-year player Harrison Bryant. Bryant's just $4,000 in the slate. David Njoku's going to miss this game. Pharaoh Brown got injured in the last game, may not play in this game depending on when we're watching this, and he's $4,000, so he's basically a kicker price tag, but has way more upside because of touchdown possibility in this offense. Now Bryant is an athletic 3rd-year tight end who in his final year of college actually went over 1,000 yards, but he really hasn't gotten much playing time since his rookie year. He's basically been a backup since his rookie year, but he got some time when David Njoku was hurt and Hooper was hurt. In week 7 against the Bengals, right, just so happens to be this matchup as well, he actually had the number 1 tight end performance of that week with over 20 fantasy points. And then in week 8, those are the only 2 times he was a starter, and he only scored 3.5 fantasy points. It's a small sample, not much take from it outside of the fact that he is going to be probably used in the red zone. And heading into this season, Jacoby Brissett targeted tight ends at a top 5 rate, and based on the usage David Njoku was getting this year, that was actually increasing. So Harrison Bryant's a great play, but not really in the captain spot. And let's talk about another value from the Bengals. And since Jamar Chase is out, it's likely going to open up $1,200 Mike Thomas. Now, Mike Thomas played week 1 when T. Higgins got hurt, so there's a somewhat chance that Mike Thomas is actually just the direct backup to T. Higgins, and a guy like Stanley Morgan might be activated for this game to be behind Jamar Chase. There's still that chance. We'll have to track the news here, but let's just assume Mike Thomas is indeed the fill-in. Well, Mike Thomas is not Jamar Chase, spoiler alert, so he's not going to get the same role downfield and on these screen passes. It won't be that advantageous because, look, he's not the greatest athlete. He has some burst, but really no speed and no agility, something that Jamar Chase has a lot of. And Thomas has never topped 132 yards, not in the game, but in an entire NFL season, and he's been in the league since 2016 as a 6th-round pick, so he doesn't have much upside. Now, he did earn 5 targets in week 1, but that game went to overtime. He ran 42 routes. Don't expect that here, and he was only able to turn that into 1 catch for 5 yards when T. Higgins was hurt. It's much more likely that $5,200 Hayden Hurst is the guy who steps up here and sees some more usage as a 3rd option in the passing game with Jamar Chase out for the Bengals. He'll face this Browns defense that's actually allowing a 74% catch rate. That means 74% of the passes coming the tight end's way against them have been caught this year. And if we take a look at his season targets this year, they bounce around from being pretty high, 8 or 7 7, but then they go all the way down to 2 or 3. Now, why is this? Well, some people might just think it's inconsistency. No, he's actually been injured for 2 of his 7 games. In 4 of his 5 healthy games this year, he's earned at least 7 targets. And now Jamar Chase is gone. And since those 10 plus targets per game now have to go somewhere else, you could expect maybe 1 or 2 of these to go to Hayden Hurst. And instead of him averaging 5.6 targets per game, we start to see this number approach 7 or 8 in this contest. And because of this, I actually took Hayden Hurst over 9.5 fantasy points on prizepicks.com. I have him projected for around 11 in the DFS blueprint this week for this game. If you want to take this bet with a free bet on PrizePicks up to $100, just click the link in the description of this video, the code SAL22 on prizepicks.com. You get a free bet up to $100. And hey, if you're enjoying this content, be sure to follow for more. Okay, so we talked about a lot of tight ends. We talked about the wide receivers. Let's start to talk about the running games. And we can begin with $5,600 Kareem Hunt. He's right there in the price range versus Donovan Peoples-Jones and Hayden Hurst, some of these guys we talked about. And it's interesting this year to see the production of Hunt, or should I say the lack of production. He's actually playing more snaps this year. He played 44% last year. He's playing 49% this year, earning nearly 12 touches per game. So his usage is basically the same. The offensive pieces surely have changed around him, but Nick Chubb is still having success behind this offensive line. So what's the issue? Well, it's his own efficiency. He ranks right now 41st amongst all running backs in yards per touch. This is a career worst, especially given the fact that he's healthy this year. And over the last 2 games, he's only seen 10 total touches. Now, they've been getting blown out in these games, but you would think there would be a little bit more passing game usage for him. But the problem is Jacoby Brissett isn't checking it down to him. He's running the routes, he's out there, he's playing the snaps, but he's only seeing 2.7 targets per game. But the reason why he's in play on this slate is he's just 5,600, and he ranks right now 4th in red zone touches. So if he just finds the end zone and scores 12 fantasy points or so on this slate, he's likely going to be needed, or at least have a good chance at winning you some money. So at $5,600, he's in play. I actually prefer him over the man we just talked about in Hayden Hurst. So Kareem Hunt likely comes in a little lower owned since he's next to Tyler Boyd in the pricing. And now let's go up to the most expensive play on the slate. And this is where we get to Joe Burrow at $11,400. If this was 2 weeks ago, he'd probably be like $10,000 flat, but he's had a massive last 2 weeks. Over the last 2 games, the Bengals have changed their offense, and it's led to Joe Burrow averaging over 390 passing yards per game. Obviously something that's not sustainable, but 3 touchdowns in each of these contests. And what the Bengals have done is they're just playing out of shotgun more. I think last week they only ran like actually 2 plays that weren't out of shotgun, 4 total, but some of them were kneel downs. And what this does is give Joe Burrow time to find his receivers since the offensive line is not the greatest, and it's paid off. He's been the #1 quarterback in fantasy each of the last 2 weeks. So yes, he's strongly in play. He's a great play on this slate. And if we go to the opposite quarterback in this game, Jacoby Brissett's only 9,200, and it's very rare for a quarterback to be this cheap on a 1-game showdown slate, but he hasn't topped 18 points in a game this year. He hasn't had the 300-yard bonus in any single game this year, and now he faces a Bengals secondary that ranks #9 in overall coverage and limiting quarterbacks' points against them. So this is not the greatest spot at all. Now, he still remains in play, but it's much easier to recommend a guy in Amari Cooper, who will probably also come in a little bit lower owned and is cheaper than his quarterback Brissett. And I'd also prefer the only other $9,000 player, and it's Joe Mixon at 9,400, because he's also benefiting from this shotgun offense. He's becoming much more efficient as a runner when he's getting a little bit more time. And the touchdown regression has finally come his way. He's seen touchdowns in 3 out of the last 4 games, and it's unlikely to stop because he continues to lead the NFL with 27 red zone touches and now 5 targets per game. So all of this looks great for Mixon. He's definitely a captain option here, and he is going to be somebody that is going to likely be a little bit lower owned. Now, in general, he'll probably pick up 50% ownership according to the DFS blueprint, but it should be somewhere near 60%. I doubt it gets there since there's so many good plays in this price range. And that would be the final guy above $7,000, and it's Nick Chubb. Look, he's expensive. People are going to choose Joe Burrow over him. They're going to choose Joe Mixon. They're going to go down and get T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd over him, so he will be lower owned, and he should be. But because of that, it's going to open up some leverage at Nick Chubb on this slate. What this translates to is, yeah, he's not nearly as good of a play as the other guys around him, but because he's lower owned, it starts to make him a better play. If he only comes in 42% owned when the guys around him are 55% owned, well, that's a little bit of leverage that we need on a slate like this. And at the end of the day, he's still been very efficient. #1 in broken tackles, top 5 in productivity amongst running backs, and he's only behind Joe Mixon in red zone usage. So if you're getting a double touchdown, a multi-touchdown game here out of Nick Chubb, which is something he's done already this season and plenty of times in his career, yeah, it's going to be paying off for you at lower ownership. But now here's the thing that might confuse you, but let me explain. I think he's a great low-owned play, but I only have him projected for 15.5 fantasy points. So because of that, I take his under on PrizePicks 17.5 points. It's important to disconnect your prop betting with your DFS play. You can disconnect them. Sometimes like this, you can leverage them off of each other. You can kind of hedge out a little bit, but I'm going to be disconnecting these two. I have my portfolio of props separate. I take the under here with a free bet up to $100. You can too. Code SAL22 or the link in the description below on prizepicks.com. Again, that is a free bet link down below. All right, let's hit on another value. So we go all the way down to the bottom. And if you're not talking about kickers and defenses, and they're firmly in play on this slate, it's a low total game of just 47 points. The kickers on this slate are actually pretty quality, so they're all in play here. I'd probably take Harrison Bryant over a couple of them, but outside of that, below those price points, you have only a couple of options, and really not many of them are in play. Expect Trent Taylor at $200 to maybe run 10 to 15 routes in this game, maybe sees a couple targets. So if you want to get there, you can. I only have him projected for like 1.5 points. We talked about Mike Thomas, and then maybe Stanley Morgan is activated to be a backup. We'll have to track that news, but other than that, it's just David Bell and Michael Woods for the Cleveland Browns. Now, who are these players? Well, David Bell is the clear wide receiver 3 in the Browns, and Michael Woods is a rookie. He was injured earlier in the year. He's a wide receiver 4. And you can see it right here. David Bell played 34 snaps to Michael Woods just playing 6 last week, and David Bell ran 4 times as many routes. The problem? He's only averaging 1.3 targets per game. He's only scored 5 points 1 time this year, so it's really difficult for him to pay off this price tag. Now, he could find his way into the end zone and get his first career touchdown, so that's a possibility. But outside of that, just basically stick to the kickers and defenses as values here. You can take a stab at Mike Thomas, but it's not looking too good. Now, if you want to increase your chances of actually winning at DFS and stop hitting the deposit button and over just basically throwing this money away as entertainment money and not an investment, well, you can get the DFS blueprint link down below. It's my 5-step system. It has 7 different tools that you can see right here in it to help you win more at DFS. Join the thousands of people that are using it right now. The link in the description below. I appreciate y'all tuning in. If you're not already, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you know when the videos go up, and even we go live before some of these games.